Hey y'all, this is excuse me. This is Tyler Blake with TylerBlakeArt.com again, and this is day 78 of my 100 days of making comics. That's kind of freaky to think about because that means I have less than a month left. Actually, I have about 3 weeks left, ish. So, anyways, I am just doing some more inking. I did spend a little bit more time already today doing a little bit more pencil tightening up and some inking already. And so I'm just gonna kind of keep talking while I work on these. Oh, I'm also going to, in just a second, I'm going to excuse myself from the camera for a moment and go grab a book because I was going to do my weekly art reference book discussion today. I meant to have the book ready and I completely spaced it. I could always put it off till tomorrow, but I feel like doing it today, so I'm going to do it. Okay. In fact, this is a good place to probably do that because I am doing the inking on... I know I have like this backlight because of this window behind me, and I'm never really sure like how well stuff shows up, but I'm inking his left boot down here, and boots, like tall boots, by their nature get compression wrinkles, and I used to really struggle with, I didn't understand, like, if you're trying to fake your way through something like that, you end up just with, like, at least for me, you just kind of end up with a bunch of lines that don't really make any sense or look like what you wanted them to look like, and that's just frustrating. So that brings me to another of my Burne Hogarth books, Drawing Dynamic Wrinkles and Drapery. So I'm going to excuse myself for just a second here and go grab that. I'll be right back. Okay, sorry about that. So most of my reference books had dust jackets at one time, and now they don't. So there's Dynamic Wrinkles and Drapery by Burne Hogarth, and there's his splash page. A guy in his frontier buckskins with wrinkles all over the place. So that would make kind of a good Joker, I think, because that dude looks crazy. You could kind of a classical Greek girl there, and like, beautiful job of the wrinkles on her dress, I guess. I don't know if there's a special word for that. So these are what he calls bend wrinkles. So he breaks the book up into sections. Actually, let me back up a little bit. He's got direct thrust wrinkles, bend wrinkles, crossing wrinkles, compression wrinkles, fragmentation wrinkles, swag and hanging wrinkles, trap and closure wrinkles, flying wrinkles, passive, inert, and lying wrinkles. And then chapter 11 is wrinkle patterns, textures, and materials. So I'm gonna go to... So, when I was in high school and really, just spending all my time either reading comics or trying to learn how to draw, when I was starting to study these books, I was kind of getting to a point. So, okay, a little bit of backstory. My older brother, I'm gonna ink for a second while I tell the story. My older brother had this friend that lived up in Bellingham, Washington. So Scott, he was in your neck of the woods. And this dude was a total legitimate geek. And he had like this amazing comic book collection that he, and I don't even remember how my brother met this guy, but because we didn't live up there. But anyhow, this guy lent us just boxes and boxes and boxes of comic books going back to the 70s. So this would have been in like 1995, probably. And I suddenly found myself as a introverted, 16, 17-year-old kid that was trying to learn how to draw and was really into comics with, like, 2 decades worth of mostly Marvel X-Men titles, and some independent stuff too, and I'll get into that. So, I mean, talk about being in geek heaven, right? So, it had like all the John Byrne and Chris Claremont X-Men stuff from like 1970. I don't know if it was like 73 or 74. It had all the, the Brood storyline, which I loved because it was like, it had this like strong science fiction element to it. And, it had like, so basically like all of the X titles from that point on were in this guy's collection, and he just let us borrow it for as long as we wanted to because he'd, and they're all bagged and boarded and everything. It's, we just read one, put it in the, bag it, board it again, put it back in the box, grab the next one, and, gosh, I mean, so many comics. And so that was also my first exposure to indie comics, right? Because, this guy had, all of the original Ben Edlund issues of The Tick. And this was just a little while before the Tick before the Tick Saturday morning cartoon came out. So I started reading that comic right about the time the cartoon came out, and so it was like, oh, this is like the comic, but they changed this, but it's still really funny. So like, other than the comic, my favorite version of the Tick is still the Saturday morning cartoon show. I never really bothered with the live action stuff because I was frankly annoyed they canceled the cartoon to do a live action show because I loved the cartoon. It was great. So anyway, and then the other one was a book called Poison Elves. And I think maybe Mike Emmerich I had mentioned that book on the, seems like maybe it was in the 100s Facebook group, and I want to say it was Mike Emmerich said, oh yeah, I forgot all about Poison Elves. Well, the guy that created Poison Elves was named Drew Hayes. Unfortunately, he's passed on, but he lived up in Bellingham, and this is like back in, there wasn't Kickstarter back then, and there wasn't, this guy like really put his work in, and he was doing like all of the writing and the art. It was a black and white book. He was doing all the writing, all the editing, all of the art, and the distributing and marketing himself, and it was like kind of a dark fantasy, that the main character is this elf named Lucifer, but it's not spelled like the devil Lucifer, and so that was kind of a running gag in the comic. Somebody would find out his name and they'd be like, oh, and he'd be like, not like that. So, but it had humor, and I'm not going to make this all about Poison Elves, but I'll probably come back to that at some point. I guess my point is that was my introduction to independent comics, and it hadn't really occurred to me that there was really much besides Marvel and DC and Image. So, the, that was kind of like the beginning of a new world for me. So, when, I'll admit it, I lost my train of thought. Just, that was my first exposure to independent comics, and I really enjoyed it. So, I know what I was gonna say. So, I'm a big fantasy geek, and unfortunately, especially like at that time with movies, the vast majority of fantasy movies were pure crap. The if you've never seen Time Bandits, spare yourself. Don't bother. But like Clash of the Titans was probably, you know, and I'm talking about the original Ray Harryhausen, right? Hate that new thing. Clash of the Titans was probably the movie that had the most to do with me becoming a geek, and that and other Ray Harryhausen projects. I just loved that stop motion stuff when I was a kid. Tell you what, I will tell a funny story about stop motion effects and my brother tomorrow when I do Day 79's video. I've kind of gone longer than I meant to, and I got quite sidetracked. So, Poison Elves being a fantasy comic, people were, I had mostly been reading superhero comics where everybody's wearing tights, and so nobody really draws wrinkles, right? And with the superhero titles, especially back then, it was just like muscular human form with the genitals blurred out, and you do your like superhero spandex pattern over the musculature. And lots of cross hatching because it was the 90s. So, reading Poison Elves, I was like, they were wearing basically like medieval or Renaissance era clothing, depending, and it was like, oh wow, there's this whole new dimension of stuff to kind of learn how to draw. I mean, like sometimes somebody would be wearing a suit or something in a superhero comic. But so when I got this book, this right here, that just kind of blew my mind. These 2 pages, like the way he did the wrinkles on the boots and like his explanation of how that works. That was like the first time, and this book in general, for not just for like boot leather wrinkles, but like the wrinkles like these that form around your elbow and that kind of thing. It was the first time that kind of stuff started to make sense, and I started to be able to draw it in a way that I was happy with. So, this is one of my very favorite art reference books. And I guess I don't really have any art reference books that I don't like, but I have like my favorites that I go to again and again and again, and that I've worn out, and this is one of them. I mean, it's not worn out, but I've sure spent a lot of time with it. So, anyways, I'm going to shut this down, and for all of my fellow Americans, I hope you're having an excellent 4th of July, and for everybody else in the world, I hope you're having a really splendid Thursday. So, keep on reading comics, buying comics, and making comics, and I will see y'all tomorrow. Bye.